Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, second part of my conversation with Shane Zaiger from Iowa, and son of Bob, who I knew was a national dealer, made the circuit, but passed away a couple years ago, was a little bit older than me. Didn't know him that well, but had a good reputation, a nice guy, and always there smiling with his wife at all the shows I was there. So thanks, sponsors, Topps Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, COMC.com, and Beckett Medium, Beckett Braiding, Beckett Authentication. Thanks, Shane, and thanhanks, listeners. Here it is.
What few shows I've gone to, I've run into people that I would recognize from 20, 30 years ago, behind the table, in front of the table. I haven't got to talk to many of them. Don't even know if a lot of them even remember me. That happens because I was the person who quit going to shows once I was running our business. So I wasn't real visible from time to time. My dad still wanted to do those shows. I'm like, okay, you go do that, Dad. Okay, I'll just stay in Iowa. And that's how we did things.
I'm hearing your family situation and your other considerations. We hired a bunch of great guys like you who were willing to move to Dallas, but loved the esprit de corps of working in the hobby with some other like-minded, almost all guys that were on the road, and you would have fit in great, Shane.
Yeah, there were times when I thought about leaving Iowa. I got close on several. I don't think I ever actually talked to anyone down with you guys, even though that would have been really fun. And I appreciate the sentiment. I had talks with collectors when they were hiring people when grading was taking off. I talked to a couple other people in Dallas. I don't want to name drop.
But it sounds like you had a good thing going. You enjoyed what you're doing. You've evolved it over the years. When I see at the shows, you're enjoying and you're walking out with a bunch of cards. And I've used your logic on my wife that I'm buying more in order to sell more. Subtraction by addition.
Yes.
And I'm going to give Shane credit for that buying a few items that get plugged into my other lots to make them look better, a little frosting on top. We're both doing COMC and we're both doing eBay. The main platforms you're using?
At this point, yeah. I went back to having a real job in 2017, but what I thought was going to be a 10-year plan of working for them after 2 years, I knew wasn't going to last 10 years. Mid-2019, I started taking a look at how I wanted to re-enter, but this time I wasn't going to quit my job. I was going to build the coffers, so to speak. And 2019 was a great year to start that. We didn't, of course, know what would happen the following year, but I remember at the 2019 National, which I know a lot of other people in the hobby that have really exploded their footprint in the hobby. That was the National it started at. You hear it from Jeff Wilson. You hear it from Ryan Johnson. I was there to spend time with Rob Veras and Dave Slipka and just hang out and just pick at the bones of people who know a lot more than I do. Because the only thing I knew in 2019 is I wasn't going to do brick and mortar retail again. I tried that to a certain degree from 2014 to 2017 and saw how the industry changed and had decided, I don't think this is what I want to do. So what can I do? And that's when I was talking to Tim Getch. I'd been using their site for 7 years to that point already, but had never really been all in because for several years in there, I was far away from the hobby. I told Tim, I'm going to commit to this and I'll be one of your bigger sellers within a year or two. I didn't realize it would explode quicker than that just because everything you sent them in 2020, you were going to sell immediately. It was a crazy year. And then from that point on, I knew at some point I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to move this volume, which is basically the leftover inventory from our business. And it wasn't until my dad got sick. Okay, I got to figure out how to move all this stuff because I'm playing the 5-year game now, not the 20-year game. And I didn't want to go back to eBay. I was fighting it. At this point, I'm consuming some YouTube content, not the cookie cutter stuff that is the most popular, but the next level stuff of guys who have been in the same boat as me or are, or trying to make a go of it in a different way than I was before. I came right back to, you can't beat eyeballs. I had to go back to eBay and have just been real meticulous at all the best ways I can move volumes efficiently and as quickly and as profitably as I can. Anyone could have just opened my storage locker and said, here, I'll give you 10 grand. Fairly Wells. I've always been someone who felt if I put in the work, I can maximize what I can sell this stuff. If I want to stay a one-person operation, which is definitely the plan, I think I might be capped. I talked about doing other things, maybe creating some social media content, maybe getting involved in other aspects of the hobby that you can do simultaneously. and I'm already running the volume and sales levels that I want, I can't add anything more than I'm doing. I had a massive COMC account that I've had to take a step back on in the last year and a half because the stuff we're doing on eBay is time consuming. Shipping is time consuming, listing and taking photos, even if you have the upgraded technology.
The issue is scalability. And you and I are working the dollar boxes at the shows, and we're not competing with shop owners. Only people that can go in there have to have a low overhead strategy for buying low and selling a little bit higher. The days of finding $100 cards for $1, I'm not saying it's never happened, but I'm not even expecting that to happen.
No, not at all.
With the overhead that a local card shop would have, they can't work the dollar box at a show and put it in their $2 box in their LCS. They may be even losing money at that because of rent and overhead. And so that's why we don't have more competition. And same thing with COMC. Each person on COMC has kind of a strategy. And if you're not aware of what's on COMC and you just indiscriminately buy thinking, hey, this is a good card, it'll probably sell on COMC, that's not true in some pretty crazy situations where a very high demand card goes for really cheap, or a very low supply card can go very cheap. It could be numbered to 50, but there's 5 of them there somehow on COMC because it's a brand that got broken to the nth degree. Sometimes on COMC, the better players, there's so much competition to be the lowest price. And so I think you figured out, and I'm learning too, that certain things it's better just to go to eBay with than try to pay 50 cents for card and group them in some meaningful way. And you've given me some tips, but I'm realizing I want to learn from you, but I don't want to copy you. Shane is doing some things that's working for him. I'm not going to do it exactly how he does it, but I take some of the points that you're making and say, pictures are more important than what I thought. You just described a lot and people think, oh, that's great, I'm going to buy it. No, if you don't have a great picture, or if you're not having free shipping, or you're not continuously listing lots, I just sporadically put stuff up there. I'm not showing my stuff to best advantage. Yet, you said an important thing. You had a 20-year plan. You've accelerated it to 5. My plan is 10 years, and it probably ought to be 5 of getting rid of this stuff. And that's scary to me. Dad made it to 97.5, but the last year wasn't so great. So
right.
I don't want to be going right up until the end. I need to be consistently working it and finding a new home for these cards. They're not super expensive, but they're good cards of good players.
One of the rewarding things about selling on eBay, what we're doing, selling lots, that you don't get on COMC because you're an anonymous seller on COMC, right? If you have an identifiable name, my last name's in my title.
I would sell more if I was more identifiable, but then I'd get more interruptions.
Probably.
So it's a trade-off. I don't want people to buy from me because it's me, and I don't want them to get mad at me if I'm not as reasonable as they think I should be. I just want to find a home for these cards. And if I put a price that they don't like next year, if it hadn't sold, everything's eventually going to sell. So I will lower the price.
Where I was going with that too, though, is not even as much COMC where you're anonymous, but like when you're selling on eBay with what we're doing, with what's going on in the market right now, particularly for ultra modern and graded, we're dealing with all these repackers and selling cards. And you can appreciate this, or maybe it annoys you, I don't know, but like pricing of cards has become such a easily findable math equation. It's, well, comps are this, I'm buying at this, and it's rushes through an entire show in a matter of minutes, right? So this is one of the things where it's been rewarding for me since I've been back on eBay for the last year and a half, is that by selling lots, and I don't really have the time to do this often, but when I've taken the time to read a thank you message I've gotten, or go and read my feedback, where it's rather apparent that almost everything I'm selling is either going to a legitimate end user, an actual collector, or I'm selling to someone who has a card shop or is a local dealer somewhere, and they are turning the stuff specifically into inventory where their goal is to find the end user.
Find the end user, right.
And we opened our store in 94, like 6 weeks after the baseball strike started. The hockey lockout was going on at the same time. We had 5 or 6 hobby shops within 25 miles of where we were. But my dad knew if we just did everything right, it was never our goal to put anyone out of business, but we wanted to create an experience for customers that allowed them to feel happy, fun, like it was a home in our store. After a couple years, we were the only one left in our area. And my dad, I remember that I still lived at home. So this was sometime in the last half of the 90s. He goes, Shane, someday someone is going to figure out the franchise retail model for the hobby. And it's going to change everything. There have been many times where I thought we had someone enter the space where that might actually happen. Just a few examples in the last few years. You've seen what Jimmy's done with Roadshow. You've seen what Jeff Wilson is doing and wants to try and do. My money is on Michael Rubin trying to take over that part of the hobby as well. Probably not on the top of their priority list though right now. But I think the hobby shop grading scale is probably the first step in what will be many. I'm curious about your opinion of the hobby shop, because I know you've got some decent ones. I'm talking to Rich when I've been down in Dallas. I've got some decent ones up here, but they're probably fewer and far between. So given how we are on the same page of wanting to do things the right way, but hobby shops are still all over the place. And if you got backing or whatever, you don't necessarily have to have the hobby in the best interest. Like I said earlier, greed and pretentious behavior is at the top of the list for a lot of people. So I'm just curious what your opinion is going forward of the hobby shop experience, the ownership, and what hobby shops are actually going to look like and feel like.
I think the evolution is that hobby shops have 4 income streams. They have wax, unopened product. That's probably number 1. Number 2 is probably glamour cards, high-end, graded, more expensive cards. A third category is either apparel or other ancillary kinds of things, supplies, stuff like that. All those 3 things are easy to inventory. The fourth, however, is what will separate stores, and that is the ability to sell singles. And singles that are not easily inventoried, buying collections and weeding them back in, having some perspective, sorting and managing a million SKUs. Rob Veras can do it. But unless you want to have 42 employees like him, you're going to have trouble doing that. To me, that's the part that's not franchisable. The first 3 parts are, I think that's exactly where Jeff Wilson's going. So if he stays in that lane, and the only singles he's saying, if it's a dollar box single, he may have a dollar box in there, but it's not going to be a major source. And to go in to pick out a number or 2 to finish your set, to me, that's not franchisable. You need a very knowledgeable person buying vintage or buying modern cards. Burbank, they have it down to a science, but they only have certain days and certain qualified buyers where you get in line. They've been very smart in moving in a controlled manner toward being the preeminent place for that kind of stuff because they provided liquidity. But these other stores, if Fanatics wants to get big into card shops, they're going to make it mainly about apparel, unopened product, and some high-end graded cards. It wouldn't surprise me if they got into grading or had some kind of preferred relationship. They already control a lot of the product. So if you're a shop, part of your buffer, part of your protection, if you're a mom and pop and have a really trusted employee like a son, Shane, then you could sell singles. And I think singles can have a higher profit margin if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing or you don't have inventory controls, you could have a lot of shrinkage.
Definitely. Do you think in the last 5 years, because it was like beating my head against the wall every day, everyone who came in the store, what's this worth? What's this worth? What's this worth? Having this overwhelming feeling that no one was actually collecting anything, that I'm just supplying my future competitors with inventory, right? All these people spending money at my store are going to be show dealers, which there's nothing wrong with that. But like I said before, you just want some end users. Your viewpoint of how we've seen the hobby in the last 5 years, have we done a good job of educating actual collectors to just buy what they enjoy and not get wrapped up in the rat race of what we've always seen in the hobby?
I don't think that's the message, to buy what you enjoy. People say that, but what they really say is buy what other people enjoy. I'll tell you what you need to enjoy. The recent announcement, the GameStop thing, where GameStop is going to have buy lists for PSA graded cards. And people think, oh man, that's good. I'll tell you what, those buy prices are going to be like Burbank's buy prices. When you publish a list, you're not going to get 80% of the comp. It's going to be a low percentage. You're not going to go in there unless you're really hard up for money. The savvy card shop owner that really knows what's going on is going to know not how much to pay only, but also what to buy. And they're going to know, if I buy it for this, I can wholesale it out the other way. I'm going to keep my customers' liquidity, but I know what wholesale and retail is for this card. I'm not going to lose. I can either sell it slowly at a higher price or quickly. The dynamics of the long tail, and that nobody can know everything, and that every card has a different value, makes it, to me, very difficult to think about franchising that kind of model. But if 80% of your revenue is coming from wax, from current product, then the other stuff is just gravy. And if you have some shrinkage on your gravy, you're not going to lose a lot of sleep over that. And you're selling jerseys and caps. It's like lids. It makes no sense for lids to have single cards unless they're behind lock and key, very high profile, very expensive cards. But they can sell boxes, and those can be inventoried.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if there were a cash register system that was sophisticated, and Fanatics could do this if they put some kind of, not QR code, but some other kind of RFID or barcode on each card that came out that would automatically connect it to a cash register, that you'd scan it, your inventory control recognizes it. But that's barcode the 52 Topps mammal unless it's graded. So raw cards will always be problematic. And I don't know about you, but most of the cards I buy are raw.
Yes. Ever since I've been back in this mindset for a year and a half, it's 100% raw.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge and sharing your stories about your dad.
The man in the house of cards.